Hello, everyone. This is Enamul Haque from Bangladesh, and I'm with my friend Philip Shah from Canada. This month, we are going to talk on a totally different issue. The issue that we are all looking at it every year is wildfire. And this wildfire, in general, affects almost every region. Probably the tropical region has the least of it. In terms of Bangladesh, for example, we have wildfires, but most of them are man made. In other parts of the world, just to give you some statistics, there are about 61 to 62,000 wildfires happens every year on average. More or less about 7.1 million hectares of land are burned every year. And this year, particularly last year, 2022, there was 69,000 roughly wildfires. So there was slightly more wildfire than average. But it's not a new event. But this year in particular, this has happened in a quite differently dramatic in many parts of the world, including Canada and the United States, and even Siberia. So let me, with this introduction, let me invite Philip Shah and get some idea about the wildfire that is happening around his world. Philip.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And hello to everybody out there. Philip Shaw here from Dresden, Ontario, Canada. And it is interesting, the wildfire issue, because in Canada, we have wildfires every year and catastrophic wildfires every year. If you think about Canada, it's a cold country, but when it warms up in the summertime, we don't have extreme heat, but it's extreme heat for us, anything above 30 degrees Celsius. So in Western Canada and Northern Canada this year, we've had a lot of wildfires. And currently, we've had territorial capitals of this country completely evacuated, because they're threatened by wildfires that are currently threatening the Northwest Territory capital of Yellowknife, as well as Kelowna, British Columbia, on the western part of Canada, where wildfires have destroyed several homes and continue to threaten bigger cities. And of course, along with that, I'm sure in the news that you've seen the terrible wildfires they had in Lahaina, Hawaii, which wiped out that town and killed over 100 people, and they still got about 800 missing. And the President of the United States has been there the last few days talking about trying to rebuild that town. But of course, there's also been wildfires in Greece and Tenerife and in Spain on the Canary Islands and other places around the world. So it is a very significant phenomena. I don't know if Dr. Haque quoted this statistic, or talking about 75% or so of these fires are caused by human activity, and that could be almost anything. But in a place like Canada, for instance, these are taking place in the wilderness, where there's really no human activity in great expanses of the Canadian wilderness. And so they must be happening by other means, whether it's thunderstorms or whether it's lightning strikes or whatever it may be. The problem is that there's a huge threat to the economy, especially in Western Canada and Northern Canada. Even the evacuation of the provincial capital in the Northwest Territories, there's only one road going out of that place, because it's very far north in the Canadian Arctic, and very difficult to maintain. But they managed to get everybody evacuated, and currently in Kelowna, British Columbia, a much more populated area, there's a havoc in many parts of this country.
Yes, Phil. I think what you have summarized is pretty well the event that is happening. There are two issues that I see. Number one, whether it is linked to the climate change, yes or no. And secondly, the issue that we should also look into it from an environment, is it all bad in terms of whether this is all bad for everyone? The answer is, if I take the second question first, the answer is not always, because people would say, and naturalists are saying, wildfire is a natural phenomena. It happened. It's a strategy of the forest to preserve the sanctity of the forest, to preserve the biodiversity. See, if a forest does not have a wildfire, the whole upper growth is so much that the lower undergrowth is almost vanished. So in order to have the lower undergrowth, in order to have the sunlight penetrate through, to create the habitat for butterflies, to create habitat for grazing animals in particular, the wildfire is not really bad. And that is how people should not always see everything bad for human being is bad for everyone. I think that is one caution that I would like to raise, because the way we are putting all the news is that it is so bad. Yes, it is bad when a city is affected. That is where things are. So I think the strategy should be to find out a way to how to ensure that cities are protected from wildfire rather than putting out wildfire everywhere in the world. And that is particularly I'm not in favor of. California is an example where there is a lot of wildfires. In fact, compared to many other places, it is one of the places where there's a lot of all wildfire are not bad. And many people in the tropics in particular, I will say there was the what slash and burn cultivation technique in forest. And what they do, people have a controlled wildfire in an area, and traditional what you call people might say these are the natives, but basically people who are living traditional in the hill areas, they use the hills for agriculture, and they burn one area of the hill, control burning, and then they produce their crop and leave that area for wildlife for the next 7 8 years, and they burn another area. That's how the whole control fire burning happening in the tropical from Philippines all the way here. And the reason that this was labeled as one of the difficult or bad element, I think it comes from the timber merchant, because timber merchants do not like the wildfire. They want big trees. So they actually are always working against the wildfire. So as you know, that when we talk about environment, we should understand that as a strategy. That is number one. Number two, as you mentioned, that world statistics have said that 75% of the wildfire are all created by human intervention, which means people may have campfire in the forest, people may have thrown away cigarette, and that's also true. Yeah. Tourists enter into forest, they have the various other reasons for which it happens. It is also even by a standing car on dry land when you have a heated area. Wildfire may start from many other events. In addition, naturally, there is also fire, like thunderstorm is a very good reason for, creating fire. Dense forest often catches fire because of because the trees, when they are attached to each other, this creates fire naturally. So my point is that it is a bad thing when it affects human being, but we should recognize the fact as a natural strategy that look, this is part of the life in forest, and for wildlife it is not that bad. So slash and burn farming, which is very common. On the other hand, when tourists and go into areas, now see, more and more people are going into forest. In Bangladesh, we go into forest in the dry season because the tropical wetland is very dangerous, particularly in the wet season. It's full of snakes, full of wild animals, and it's so that is one of the reasons people go to the forest during dry season. And dry season is not that bad in Bangladesh because in many parts, even if it is dry, there are some degree of moisture. So as I mentioned to you, I was traveling to Sundarban with my foreign guests, about 34, 35 of them, all from South Asia, as I'm involved with the South Asian research team. So we had a program in on the boat, and then we had one day off in the forest. So we went to Sundarban using the boat, finishing our program. We walked into the what they call the watchtower. Remember the place you and I went?
That makes me nervous, that watchtower. Might see a tiger there.
When we saw the tiger. So we saw the tiger there, and we were right there. And then we saw a noise coming. In fact, in the morning, we saw a big ship coming with the tourist. So we decided that we will go to the beach, which is across the grazing land, if you remember the grazing land. And we'll go after these people come back from the beach. So at about midday, about 12 to 1 o'clock, we were probably, that is the time, we were They were coming, and we decided to go to the beach because it's a beautiful black beach, very rare. So it's a beautiful black beach. You remember walking into that
Yes.
beach? Yes.
Yeah.
So we went there, and as we were crossing the grazing grassland, which is a grassland for the deer, and obviously tigers are there, we saw small fires burning around the forest. And this is an area full of tigers and deer. So we were very worried what to do, because one way we could actually walk away. But all other group were saying, bring the forest department, notify them. But we realized that if we leave that place in such a dry place, it will burn the whole forest. And this will be dangerous for the wildlife. So we started to put down this forest fire by putting sands into it. And the reason it happened because the tourists who were crossing by, they thrown a cigarette butt. So you realize that a lot of time this kind of behavior happens. And as I said, as we travel more and more, tourism has increased significantly, and people go to the nature-based sites for tourism. I think people should be more careful about it, and that is something we should be worried, because I think we have a huge number of tourism everywhere in the world now, if we look carefully, because our income has gone up globally, and as our income has gone up, people can afford tourism. So
Yeah.
previously, when people could not go to tourism, now we can go, and accident happens. So human induced wildfire is going up. My surprise, and this is a question to you, maybe it will be helpful for the viewers also. What has surprised me, particularly in the Hawaiian case in this time, that it almost swept through the whole city, and people could not get out of it. So the death that has happened is a biggest surprise for a country like United States, which has ability to monitor everybody in the world. And that is why biggest surprise to me, how come they could not monitor this fire coming. You have any idea on this? This could be helpful for people to realize that we should be prepared for such events more and more, and I think our readiness matters in this particular.
In my case, I've been to Lahaina, Hawaii. I've been there. I've been there several times. And it just seemed like this time around, it happens in the structures there. It's not very big there, that town, but it just was so hot, the fire. I just think it was more of a unique type of circumstance that came together there that took that out. So I don't know how avoidable that would be. Maybe you could avoid a lot. I don't know. But of course, we also have to think, you mentioned in the Sundarban forest and just that small little example. But also, we got to think about our Australian friends. They have wildfires all the time during the summertime, and I've been in that country when it's tinder dry. Difficult it is. So, I guess we're just gonna have. It's something we're gonna have to live with. There might be a link to climate change. It may be getting worse. It may not be. Not necessarily sure. It's not necessarily all bad, but certainly it's bad when it impacts the big cities, and there's quite a big economic cost that has to be dealt with. So as we move ahead, hopefully things will get better, and of course it will get better in Canada because it'll start cooling down. But that'll change in the southern hemisphere when it starts heating up.
So I think the world should look, instead of looking for what are the causes, we should look into these as a natural phenomena as much as possible and be prepared for it. I think that is the biggest challenge that we are going to face probably in the next coming days, because yes, climate change is going to make the whole dry spell becoming probably bigger. The summer the world will be more heated. And if I remember, this one of the prediction of IPCC was that by 2050, Dubai will have a daytime temperature as high as 72. So if you have, and if you have such a temperature, there will be more fires. And I think we should be careful. We should change our lifestyle. We should change how to live with it, and that will be probably the best strategy. Preparedness is, to me, is most important.
I know in Canada, there's thoughts of getting a national forest fire defense force, getting much better coordinated just to handle and be more prepared as we go on into the future.
Okay. Okay. With that, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for today, this month, and we will get back to you again in the next month. Thank you. Bye.